I don't really know how to start this one. You saw the title. You saw the thumbnail. You know what we're doing. I know what I'm doing. At least I hope so. I want to make a chia pet fur coat, which is not as gruesome of a project as it may sound. I'm not going full Cruella de Vil, don't worry. For the uninitiated, chia pets are small terracotta figurines typically made to look like animals or cartoon characters or other recognizable figures. You apply wet chia seeds to the terracotta, water it regularly, and watch the sprouts grow to fill in the figure's hair or fur or whatever. They were first introduced in the US in 1977, they got really popular in the 80s and 90s, and they have a very annoying commercial. But chia seeds can grow on more than just terracotta. They can grow on almost any surface, in fact, including fabric. So I should be able to sew a coat, then put chia seeds on it, and make a sort of lab-grown faux fur. Kind of like organic astroturf. But before I dump hundreds of thousands of chia seeds all over my workspace, I'm gonna do some small-scale tests just to get an idea for the best way to go about this. Okay, so I've got some swatches of the fabrics that I'm planning on using for the chia coat. I have to use two different ones because I don't have enough of either, but I have enough of the two altogether. I looked at the official Chia Pet website and they recommended 2 teaspoons of chia seeds to 2 tablespoons of water, so I've got half of that here. Just mix them together, let it sit for a few minutes, and it has a texture. So I'm just going to apply this to my fabric swatches and then see what happens. Snap time. I put the samples on a sunny window ledge and watered them a few times a day by misting them with a spray bottle. They were pretty unremarkable for the first few days, but by day 4, some little white sprouts started poking through, but only on one swatch though. That sample was 100% cotton, while the other one was a bamboo rayon, making it much lighter and thus much faster to dry out. I started watering the rayon more frequently, and it started growing more rapidly, but never getting quite to the same level as the cotton. After 2 weeks, the sprouts had fully grown in, and I also discovered that I could peel the sprouts off the fabric in one solid mat, roots and all. I don't know how useful this information will be, but it is fun. Ta-da! I decided to do one more test and see how the seeds fared growing while enclosed in a plastic bag. This would keep the moisture in, meaning I wouldn't have to water it multiple times a day. But I also worried that being sealed up would make them rot or get moldy, so I used some boba straws to lift the plastic away from the seeds, and I took the sample out at night to let it air out, then re-wet it in the morning before sealing it back up. This worked pretty well up until the last day of the test, when some patches of gray fuzz started to develop. That was obviously not good, but considering how much easier it was to grow the seeds while they were in the bag, I decided it was worth the risk for the coat. I would take the bag off at night to let the coat air out and dry, just as I had with the samples. I just need to keep a close eye out and stop using the bag as soon as things got gross. So the samples are all complete. I've learned everything I can from those, and the winter weather has finally cleared up in my neck of the woods, so I think it's time to finally start working on the real coat. First, I need to make the coat base. I'm going to be using the remnants of some bed sheets that I thrifted a while ago to make a petticoat, and I'm going to keep the pattern super simple. I'm going to model it off of a shirt that I already own that I like the fit of and I think will work well for this coat. I am going to shorten the sleeves just a little bit, I think they're a little too long, and then add length to the bottom edge so it's a little closer to like a knee length. I think that'll be really nice. I don't want to spend too much time on construction, but I do still want to like hem all of the edges and do French seams just because I know I'm going to be handling this a lot and I don't want it to start fraying out. Just like a nicely finished mock-up, basically. I cut out a very basic pattern using the shirt as a guide. I cut out the back panel, 2 front panels, and 2 sleeves, which required a little bit of piecing to fit onto the scrap fabric. I sewed the front and back panels together at the shoulder seams, set the sleeves into the arm side, and then closed up the side seams. I did all this with French seams, and I finished the remaining raw edges with a double fold hem. I made a very elaborate coat support structure by zip tying a broom handle to a coat hanger. The broom handle goes through the sleeves to keep them held out so no parts of the coat get stuck together once the seeds are on. All I needed now was the bag that would act as the terrarium for the coat. I'd used a Ziploc for the sample, but even those giant vacuum seal storage bags are nowhere close to the size I need, so I had to make my own. So I've got the base coat all sewn, but before I can sew the seeds onto the coat, I need to make my hanging apparatus and terrarium bag thing. I don't know what I'm doing with my arms, but you get it. I picked up a roll of clear plastic sheeting from the hardware store. It's over in the paint section with the drop cloths. So I'm going to use this and some packing tape and build a sort of garment bag thing. I'm not totally sure how that's gonna work out, but I'm gonna try. I cut a large piece of the plastic sheeting, long enough to wrap around the hanging coat with a little room around it. I taped the edges together to make it into a big tube. I taped in a zipper at the top of the seam to make it easier to get the bag on and off. I used masking tape for this because it was a little bit stickier than the packing tape, though not by much. Then I taped the top edge closed, leaving a small gap at the center for the hook of the coat hanger to come out. I folded the top corners over and taped them down to make the bag more rectangular, like a paper bag, with the hopes that this would keep it from touching the seeds. Then I put my bag onto the coat so I could trim it to the proper length. But this is when the issues with my plan began to present themselves. Okay, it is the next day. Actually, I had to pause on this. It was starting to boggle my mind. I realized that the zipper thing isn't gonna work. The zipper's too short. It can't open up enough to fold around the wingspan of this coat. I would need to use a longer zipper, and I don't have a longer zipper that I am willing to sacrifice to this purpose. So I'm changing course. I'm going to be adding basically a drawstring channel to the bottom edge. I'm gonna have to tape on more of the plastic sheeting because I cut it too short. It's still not gonna be 100% watertight, but I don't really need it to be. But I just need this to be able to keep most of the moisture in over the course of a day, because I'm going to be removing it at night and letting it air out and then re-wetting the seeds. And you know, the process I explained earlier in this video. I think I filmed those sample segments like a month ago at this point, so I have no idea what's going on. If this video is incoherent, I'm sorry. Oh, they just turned on a fan across the... That way I'll be able to remove the plastic bag just going up and over. I think I'm just gonna leave the zipper in for now. I feel like it would be more work to take it out and close it up. So once the bag is done, I can finally start putting all the seeds on. Putting the seeds onto the coat was simultaneously super gross and very fun. I ended up using around 3.5 cups of seeds in all. I worked outside on more of the plastic sheeting and spread the wet chia seeds on using a rubber spatula. This took forever since the seeds want to stick to each other more than they want to stick to the fabric. I also tried sprinkling dry seeds onto wet fabric, thinking that would be faster, but this made a very clumpy layer, so I had to abandon that idea. Moving the coat around with the seeds was very risky business, but luckily the seeds didn't stick to the plastic sheet too much. The sleeves were definitely the trickiest part. I finagled the coat onto the hanger setup and seated the sleeves with it hanging. The spatula application method did not work well with the coat free to spin and swing around, so I finally gave in and just slathered the seeds on with my hands. I did not film this part, unfortunately, since I didn't want to get chia seeds all over my camera. This is also the point when my neighbor got up on a ladder to clean his gutters and got a clear view of me over the fence. So I was working pretty quickly to try and get things wrapped up. Literally. Once all the seeds were on, I put the bag on over the whole mess and settled in to wait for signs of life. Which did not take long. I counted the day I put the seeds on as day 0, and by the morning of day 2, the coat was covered in little white sprouts. I was totally shocked. With the samples, it took a few days for the seeds to start growing. I don't know if it had to do with the greater mass of seeds compared to the samples, or if it was just because it was a bit warmer out now, but things were looking really good. And then they abruptly were not. After another 2 or 3 days of being in the bag during the day and airing out at night, some of the sprouts had begun to turn green and grow teeny tiny leaves, but just as many had begun to shrivel up and turn brown and goopy. I worried that the bag was the cause. The seeds couldn't get enough air or light, or it was too much water or heat. Probably all of the above. I didn't want all of my sprouts to rot away, so on day 4, I kept the coat out of the bag all day. This meant I had to water it multiple times, but it was the right decision. Just by the end of that day, I saw more growth, even from some of the seeds that had turned brown. I stopped using the bag entirely after that and just kept the coat out, uncovered during the day, and put it away in our storage shed at night and when it rained. Now that I finally had a routine figured out, it was back to the waiting game. So I have a lot of downtime while I wait for these seeds to grow. So much, in fact, that I got bored and cut all my hair off. So to prevent myself from going completely bald while I wait, let's make a dress to wear with the coat. I found this curtain panel at the thrift store. It's a brown satin with this really nice crinkled texture to it. It makes me think of like tree bark or soil, which really works with the whole living, growing plants thing. I want to make just a simple little slip dress. I think that'll work really well with the whole big fur coat thing. So I've already drafted out a pattern in Adobe Illustrator and printed that out. I need to cut all of this out, get them taped together, and then I can start cutting into my fabric. I did a mock-up off camera, which led to me having to rework my pattern quite a bit, but once I had it to a place that I liked, I cut it apart and transferred it back to paper. I prepped the curtain by unpicking all the hems and cutting out the grommets. Then I could cut out all the pieces. First, I assembled the bust cups. I made 2 layers for each side. Then I stitched up the straps and turned them out by cutting a tiny slit into one end, slipping a bobby pin through that, and feeding it through the tube. After pressing, I sandwiched one end of each strap between 2 layers of the cups, sewed along the edge, and turned them out. I stitched up the other front bodice pieces that will go just under the bust, then attached the cups to them, again sandwiching between the 2 layers. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of my patrons for their support, especially those in the Magnanimous Maelstroms tier: Oscar, Obi Knit Kenobi, Evelyn, Trapped in the Midwest, Bear Hardy, and Perfect Primrose. I attached the back bodice panels and pinned in a zipper so I could try the bodice on, and it was being pretty disagreeable. The cups were angled out too much, so I unpicked and re-sewed that seam, which helped a lot, but there were still some fit issues to correct. One of the straps was angled wrong and cut into my underarm, and I had way too much room in the underbust. I fixed those issues too, and now the bodice fit well enough for me to feel okay installing the zipper. Then I moved on to the skirt, which was just 4 panels assembled with French seams, leaving a vent at the top of the center back seam for the zipper to extend into. I ended up having to do a lot of back and forth with the fit. Pencil skirts are not as forgiving as their circular or pleated kin, but ultimately I got things looking as good as I could, added some little side vents to make this skirt walkable, attached it to the outer layer of the bodice by machine, and then closed the lining layer by hand. That finished off the dress, so now I'm just waiting on the coat. It's been 1 week since I put the seeds on the coat, so I thought I'd do a little check-in. So there is definitely progress. As you can see, we have sprouts coming in quite densely down here. The back is even more. She's rotating around, but like the back is really taking off, as you can see. It's interesting that it's all mostly concentrated down at the bottom and then kind of gets less and less as you go up. I think it's probably because of the water running down. There's very little growth on the front panels and on the sleeves, and I would assume that has to do with the same reason, because they're smaller patches of fabric, so the water evaporates out of them quicker. I have fully abandoned the bag concept at this point. It was really getting gross in the bag. But that's the status update so far, 1 week in. I'm hoping 1 more week and it'll be good to go. In order to combat that pesky force of gravity, I decided to try and flip the coat so it could hang upside down. I closed the bottom edge with safety pins, slipped in another coat hanger, and further secured it with more pins. Then I very carefully flipped the whole thing to hang upside down. Later on, I added a few garden stakes held in place with binder clips to make sure the coat wasn't collapsing in on itself and smothering the seeds. This definitely helped. I started seeing more sprouts on the top half of the coat soon after flipping it, but I was already more than halfway through the window of time I had scheduled for the seeds to grow, so there was little chance of the top half growing to the same level as the bottom. But at least there would be more sprouts coming in, and the coat would be green all the way through. And then I dropped it. Twice. I didn't film any of this, unfortunately. That would have been excellent content. I was trying to put the coat up for the night in our cramped little storage shed, but the coat was still heavy with water, and it was hard to maneuver it around in the shed, and it slipped and fell to the ground. No serious damage though. The garden stakes were knocked askew, but that was easy to fix. I decided to hang it up in the garage instead, since there was more space there, but it turned out the hanging length of metal chain I tried to hang the coat on was not secure, so the coat fell again, and this time with a heavy metal chain landing on top of it. The stakes got knocked out again, and this time some sprouts came off too. I was able to reattach some of the bigger clumps by using fresh, wet chia seeds like glue and just smushing them back on. This was also all happening on the night that a big winter storm hit the East Coast, making the temperature drop about 30 degrees overnight. It definitely wasn't cold enough to freeze, and the coat was sheltered anyway, but I can't imagine that a sudden temperature change after getting dropped twice is great for plant growth. The next morning, there were some wilty patches, one chunk had begun peeling off, and the top half was still mostly seeds. Part of me wanted to give it longer to see if it could bounce back, but I just didn't have enough time, and I worried that by the time the bare patches grew in, the sprouts that had grown in first would start to die, so I gave it one more day of sunlight and water before calling it quits. During that last day, I made a quick detached lining just to have a layer between myself and my ongoing biology experiment. This was even simpler than the coat base, just some rectangles, no finished seams, no hemming, but with that, this project was maybe not complete, but at an end, so it's time to see the final results. Okay, so that's over now. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this project. Kind of a roller coaster of a process, a lot of ups and downs. The coat obviously didn't turn out the way that I was hoping. It didn't grow in fully. I think there are a lot of things I could do differently that would make it go a lot better. I do kind of want to try again and change some stuff and hopefully get a better result. Not now, not anytime soon. I need to not be doing this for a little bit, but I do definitely want to give this another shot at some point with a modified process, because I know I can do better. I can get something closer to what I wanted. The dress came out good. The dress came out very nice. I'm quite happy with it. It's pretty comfortable. It fits decently well. So at least I got something out of this video. That's not true. I got something tangible out of this video. I did also get the process and learning experience of making the coat. Boy, was it an experience. But that is all I have for today. If you would like to see whatever else I decide to try and do in the future, you can subscribe. I do really want to try and do this again at some point, so if you want to see what happens there, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. I'm gonna go take a shower, because there's definitely mold on that thing.